Welcome to Everything Life and Real Estate. Let's get started with our hosts, Linda McKissick and Dana Gentry.
Hey, all-in listeners, this is David, and today's show is super cool. It is a live podcast collaboration that took place in Round Rock, Texas, at the first ever Mega Leadership Camp for Keller Williams. We had so much fun collaborating with Dana Gentry and Linda McKissick, the hosts of Everything Life in Real Estate. This show is brought to you by our friends at Earnest, and we talked all things positioning yourself as an authority in the market with a podcast, ahas, market center and industry updates, and so much more. We hope that you enjoy this show, and without further ado, Linda, Dana, and myself, along with 125 of our favorite people.
Guys, I want to welcome you to the Everything Life in Real Estate and All in Real Estate podcast crossover event. You guys excited? We're excited. Yeah. Guys, you braved a tornado, an earthquake, skip dinner. But it's Mega Leadership Camp. We skip most meals, I feel like. The meals, we're not going to talk about the liquid meals here. I'm so excited that you guys are here. Just full disclosure, I called up Dana 3 days?
48 hours ago?
Yeah, and it was like, hey, I've got this crazy idea. Why don't we bring our audiences together and host a live podcast event? Do you think we can pull it off? And she was like, of course we can pull it off. Super optimistic all the time. And I said, so what do you think? Like maybe 30 people, we get 30 people together, 40, and she's like, if we're going to do it, we're going to go all in. We're going to do this. We're going to get 100 people here. You guys sold this thing out. We had to beg them to call the fire marshal and open it up for more. And you sold that out. So give yourselves a round of applause. I'm pretty excited. So I really just want to kick off today by asking you guys one question. Are you butt clenchers?
Oh my gosh.
They didn't know I was going to ask that, but who's going first? Have you guys had fun at the first Mega Leadership Camp? Yeah. Isn't it good to be together as leaders? Yeah, it's good to be together as leaders, especially after a pandemic. By show of hands, how many of you guys were in your role or in a leadership role in a market center prior to COVID? We got the real leaders in the house. Oh, that's awesome. You rookies, we love you too. That's awesome. Well, we have people from all across the country. I hope this is an awesome time to get away from Kalahari. Today, we're going to talk about a few things. We're going to talk about positioning yourself as an authority in the marketplace for agent attraction through a podcast. Some of the things that we've learned over the past couple of years, some of the mistakes we've made, some of the things that we would have done differently, some of the things we feel like we've succeeded at. And then we're going to launch into a live Q&A. So just to set the ground rules here, the logistics of tonight, this is actually being recorded live, okay? So because of the way that works, you need to speak into the mic. How many of you go, in your all partners, in your sales meetings, when they hand you the mic because you're broadcasting on Zoom, you go, oh, I don't need the mic. I can project. Anyone like that? I have a bunch of them in my market center. You do too, JT, right? Oh, I don't need the mic. I can project. No, you need the mic because that's how it feeds into this little machine. Now, another thing. How thankful are you for your producer?
Oh my gosh. TT, Tyler, yes.
Yeah. My producer's not here. Their producer's not here. You should have seen us with the boys.
David, not us.
The boys from Earnest, who are going to come up in just a second, trying to put all this together. I don't know if it's actually recording. I think it's recording. But anyway, thank God for your team. If you have team members here, give them a round of applause. Thank God for your team. Yeah. Holy smokes, if there's one thing to invest in, it's people, right? So, we're going to introduce each other. You've heard enough from me. So, let's introduce ourselves, and then we're going to give the floor to Chris.
Okay. I'm Linda McKissick, and I'm co-host with Dana Gentry on everything life and real estate. And we did that podcast mostly so we'd have time to talk to each other because we never had time. And then I'm also co-host with Press McKissick, wherever he is, on the Profit Share Mastery podcast. If you hadn't found that one, yes, drops on the 21st of every month for a reason. So check that one out too. And then Jim McKissick and I are launching one after we get a few more episodes called Everything Life and Financial Freedom. So if you're interested in that one, watch for that one.
And you're a regional.
Oh, and I'm a regional operating principal.
And nobody knew she's the #1 profit share earner, right? That's like old news.
That was so yesterday. What am I doing today?
I'm Dana Gentry, and I am an OP in the Ohio Valley region. Yes, woo! Have been in real estate 16 years, almost 17 years, I guess now, and still have a mini team that sells. And yeah, that's it.
And I'm David Morse. I'm the team leader and involved in all of Kristen Cole's market centers across Arizona. And really, I just do a podcast, so I get to hang out with people like you.
Well, and Dana does a great thing on Wednesday. What's your Wednesday thing?
Wednesday morning mindset. Does anybody jump on? Some of you do, I think. Yes, thank you. Okay.
I can.
Yes. And that was started the week that the world shut down, because for like 3 days, everybody was negative that I talked to. And I don't do negativity very well. So I was like, you know what? We're not going to go to a negative place. So on Wednesdays through this shutdown, we're just going to do a mindset lesson. And thankfully, Heather helps a ton with that and makes it really great. And people still keep showing up. So I'm just going to keep doing it.
I love it. I'm also the host of the All In Real Estate podcast with my co-host, Joe Quattrucci. We are about 100 episodes deep now. We talk to investors. We're really passionate about building wealth through real estate. I'm also the founder of Realfolio, a real estate investor networking meetup group. Yeah, I think that's about it. So, hey, thank you. Sure. All right, we'll talk about that a little bit. All right, I'm going to invite Chris up here. Give it up for our sponsor, Chris from Earnest.
Where do you want me? Right here in the front? Hey, everyone. Chris with Earnest, VP of Partnerships. Thank you guys for the invite and the opportunity to sponsor an awesome event with movers and shakers. By show of hands, how many guys are using Earnest at your market center today? This is awesome. All right, very good, very good. For those of you who are not familiar with Earnest yet and don't use this yet, our story started back in 2017 with a Keller Williams agent named George, and concerns that he had around and annoyances around the fact hours and hours spent his team running around collecting Earnest money checks and then driving them to the market center and dropping it off. He knew this isn't how I want to leverage this and grow this company. And then also his buyers were complaining, millennial home buyers complaining, saying, George, why is this the only way? Like, I use Venmo, I use Zelle, I use PayPal. Like, is there nothing available for this? And one of those buyers happened to be a developer and a technologist. And when he asked George that, he said, let's solve the problem. So Earnest was birthed through a Keller Williams agent named George and his home buyer. Pretty cool. And then from that moment in 2017 to now, we've grown to be the largest provider of digital earnest money deposits. We've moved, over $620 million. And the most important stat for you guys to remember is 0 instances of fraud. And that is what Earnest is all about. It's providing you guys and your agents with a secure digital payment tool that you can leverage to automate and streamline your business. Oh yeah, and at the same time, give your buyers something that really isn't like a nicety anymore. It's a thing they expect, right? I mean, there's so many tools out there outside of real estate. So when you provide that to them, we get amazing feedback from all of our users about that. So getting started with Earnest, guys, super simple. If you're a market center that holds your own Earnest money, obviously we'll work directly with you. And in 2 business days, you can be up and running, accepting digital earnest money deposits from anywhere at any time. If you're a market center, Florida folks over here, your title companies will partner with you, enroll your title companies. By the way, cherry on the top, it's completely free for you guys to use. We don't charge a setup fee. There's no monthly cost to your agents or the market center. The way we monetize is we just charge a flat $15 processing fee to the buyer, and that is it. And let me tell you something, they get 0 pushback because wires are double the cost. It's like the same cost as a cashier's check, so it's a no-brainer. Come find me, Aaron in the back as well. We have a booth at Kalahari. Thank you guys again. It's great to be here. Thank you.
All right, so guys, let's launch into the content because you guys came here for value, and we want to deliver as much value as possible. And so, let's just start the conversation around why we even considered starting a podcast in the first place. You think that would be a good place to start?
Yep.
All right.
Yeah.
How about you guys?
I'll tell a quick story and then you go. We were actually doing a regional launch party in an Indiana office, and a mega agent there, his name is Todd Paxton. He came up to us and do you remember that? And he was doing he was being a local expert as a mega agent, and he was doing these quick little interviews with other top agents and giving advice to consumers. And he was calling it Allie, do you remember what that was called? Let me ask you a questions or something like that. And so we were there for the grand opening of this, or re-grand opening of, and he came up to us and he said, "Could I grab just you and Linda really fast for just 10 minutes? I just want to ask you guys a couple questions." So we were like, sure. So we sat down in the conference room and we had so much fun. And then 2 days later, Linda called me and she's like, do you want to do a podcast? I was like, I've been kind of wanting to do a podcast too. And she's like, me too. And we were like, all right, let's go. So that was kind of how it started. Do you want to share why you?
Yeah, well, I don't know exactly why. We all have a million ideas a minute, right? I mean, all the time. So I was just happy she had the same idea that I did. I mean, she was happy to do the same idea. But because I've studied a lot about validity, and if you want to attract agents, validity is super important. And when you become the expert or you speak on topics that people are thinking, then you become a little more valid to those people. So really for me, I wanted it for the validity, because Dana and I are in the same region and we had a lot of top agents, and we knew that we would need to be introduced to them by team leaders, or maybe we would call on them. And so if we had that validity, it might just help open the door a little bit more.
Yeah, and for me, it was really similar. But for my story, I was with KW Maine. Any New England people in the house? Woo! I knew you were there. So I was with KW Maine, and when I moved to Scottsdale, Arizona, I'm looking at this huge sea of agents. There's 90,000 licenses. Yeah. And I asked myself the question, how does every single one of those 90,000 agents know me within 12 months? Because right now they don't know squat, diddly, about me, right? And what I thought, my hypothesis was that if I could get into an audio platform that all 90,000 of those people have access to, then there's a chance. And for any great achiever, like all of you, you tell us there's a chance, we're going to go after it, right? That's right. And so we launched the podcast. And here's what I'd also say. From a visionary standpoint, without an integrator, this was an idea that was also 2 years too late, right? And so I also want to kind of address that and say that, if you're thinking well, podcasting was so 2018, is it really valid right now? I'm going to tell you, yes, it is, right? And so that's really where it was birthed for us. And what I found was that hypothesis was verified over a 12 to 18 month period. All 90,000? No. But a large majority of agents who started finding us and a reason to drip on people, it really became a great platform.
One thing I would say is, I think right now everybody wants to do everything from this. And if people are listening to podcasts more than ever, the great thing about what we do, and the reason why we do it for validity, is because it's a less invasive way. Now, it's long-term play, right? I mean, it's not going to be something that, it's not like picking up the phone and calling somebody and setting an appointment. However, with the people that you try to do that with and you don't have the option, by the time they listen to you several times, they feel like that they know you, honestly. And so they're a lot more likely to pick up the phone and to talk to you at that point, or to meet with you, or you have some sort of commonality almost, I feel like.
Yeah. And in the early days, when I joined Keller Williams, they were giving me, this is going to date me, the cassette tapes. And one of them was Althea Osborne. And I thought I was getting something secret to get on the inside of that conversation. And I think they interviewed her about wealth building or something. So I've always remembered how impactful that was for me. And I know I love to listen to podcasts. I probably read less books now because I'm either listening to books or listening to podcasts. And so it really is just a great way for you to figure out who do you want to be a hero to? And then what are the conversations that they want to hear about? And we ask all the time, what are the conversations that you want to hear about? What are the topics? What are your challenges? And then another great reason to do it is Dana and I have found some amazing guest speakers, and it's people we want to hear from. And almost everybody will say yes to a podcast. So you get a chance to have some amazing guests that you can ask them all the questions you're dying to know. We've had the Profit First guy. We've had Never Split the Difference. We've had Dan Sullivan. We had some, who? Oh, yeah, Yellow Tux. I mean, we've just had some amazing guests, and that gives us a chance to pick the brains of people that we might not be able to sit in the room with.
Yeah, Gary said in Quantum Leap the other day, he reminded us that success leaves clues, and so does failure. And words out of his mouth were one of the best things you can do to attract others is interview successful people and learn how you can model them. And I immediately thought of our podcast because that's exactly what we get to do. All right, how many of you guys actually called during the session today? You guys were making phone calls. You were booking, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 appointments, right? How many of you got a no? Like Linda just said, no one says no to podcasting. No one says no to talking about themselves and having it distributed to hundreds, if not thousands of people. They don't say no. And so what we've found in Scottsdale is it's gotten us to the table. It's gotten us a seat at the table with people who are producing sometimes at higher levels than any of the agents in our marketplace. So it's giving them in our market center access to these people. It's also giving me access to have these conversations and ask them anything I want. And then it gives me a reason to stay in touch with them. So are you sick of rejection? Start a podcast. You don't get rejected. It makes you feel all warm and fuzzy, right? So guys, let me ask you this. What were some of the things that you found maybe to be difficult about podcasting?
Technology.
We have more equipment that we have in a pile that we do not know how to use. And so instead of learning how to use it, we just got rid of it and got something else. We have piles.
Some of them we couldn't even. Some of them we would get them from Amazon and we couldn't even put them together. So we would just set them to the side and go pick another one. So we chose to hire it out because that was what made sense for us, and we wanted to leverage it. And it's not. I mean, I think we pay per episode $250 an episode. We drop an episode every week, and we do nothing but record it, and then they do everything else. There's tons of platforms that you can use for podcasts. That was probably the most difficult part, I feel like, was just figuring that part out. But you just keep it simple. I mean, for 2 years, we used Zoom.
And half the time, our stuff isn't working. We use the computer microphone and the video. So half the time, you don't need anything but your iPhone or your Mac anyway. We just have the fancy stuff so we feel fancy.
Yeah. That's true. And don't stress about that because, I mean, we just hit 200,000 downloads and, we are not perfect. So, I mean, if we can do it, anybody can do it, really should be. And I'm really impressed that Jimmy's getting ready to do it, too. So there's that. But I would say that part. And then I think next is coming up with something every week. Don't you think, Tom?
Well, and I think the launching is the hardest part. I came home from after you and I talked, and there was a girl on our team that had just stepped down from being a team leader, but she was pretty techie, and her husband was the market center tech person. And here's my belief. If you're procrastinating on something, give it to somebody else. Even if they don't get it done, they'll get it farther down the field than you are. And I just kept having it on my list and never doing it. So I just gave it to her, and I said, I don't know what you're supposed to do, but help us get a podcast going. And she did. So, and now she's not the same person now, but she got us on down the field. So if you're procrastinating, it's because you're missing somebody else. So just give it to anybody and see what they can do.
I definitely agree that consistency, you've got to pick a cadence that you're going to actually be able to follow through on. And I think in the launch period, what you need to really focus on is building the pipeline and having episodes in the hopper. Okay. what we found with the most successful podcasts typically are releasing episodes. I mean, I'm even more than weekly, right? I mean, they're pumping out content. And so we figured if we're going to make a play in the real estate space, we are going to have content at least weekly. And there's times where that gets really challenging. There's times where we're 5, 6, 7 episodes ahead in the pipe, and then we turn around and we're back to 2 or 3 or 1 or 2
or 0, and it's tomorrow's Tuesday.
That's when we run a best of episode. Tricks of the trade.
Yeah, we're like, yeah, what has Gary said lately that we can talk about on here?
Exactly.
I would say one other thing too about the podcast is we made the commitment not only to each other but to our audience to be consistent with it. It's all about being consistent. People do not like podcasts, and you guys probably know some that will drop an episode and then they don't drop another for 2 more months. And then they'll drop 2 and then you don't hear from them for 6 months and then you're over it, So I think if it's once a month or if it's once a week or, whatever it is, just plan it from the beginning and say, this is what I'm going to commit to, and then stick to it. Because you can always add more in later if you want to. But I think people get used, like so many of our listeners they just wait for Tuesday morning, and they know that on Tuesday mornings they're going to be listening to it on the drive to the office or whatever it is that they're doing.
Well, and I think the consistency too goes from not just the cadence of the podcast, but it also goes into what your listeners are expecting. And this is really a marketing thing. When someone shows up to your brand, they are less on guard. Their fear lowers when they know what they're going to expect, right? If you walk into what's a popular store? What's a popular store? Nordstrom? Yeah, you walk into Nordstrom. Thank you. I don't shop. I'm super cheap. Target. Yeah, Goodfellow and Co. You walk into Nordstrom, you know what to expect. You walk into Mercedes, you know what to expect. And so your guard is actually down, right? You walk into Mercedes and you get a Lexus experience, even though it's another luxury brand, your guard's going to go up because something's going to say to you, your brain's going to kick in and it's going to say, something's not right here. This is off. The coloring, the text, what's going on here? And so what you want is consistency even in the formatting of your podcast. For us, we have a very distinct introduction. We ask the very same question of every single guest to kick it off, because what we find is it puts our listeners at ease. If you listen to our podcast, every episode starts with, so take us back before real estate. What were you doing? And what we find is that your listener kind of takes a deep sigh of relief. Now they're doing something that they know, that they recognize, that they're familiar with, okay? And so be consistent, not just in the cadence of when you're releasing episodes, but also the way that you're structuring the story arc of your podcast, because that's really what we're doing. We're storytelling, right?
And one thing about having guests on, which we haven't done a lot of this, we need to do a little bit more of it, but having a guest from another company, a lot of times nobody at that company has given them accolades or the platform or the microphone. And so if you're the person that does that, you're going to bond with them really well, because that's what most top producers want. They want a platform to either give back or teach or do something. So if you're the person pulling that out of them, you're going to be ahead of what company they're with.
So we want to make sure you guys get to interact with us. We said this was going to be interactive, and so we could keep talking, but we want to make sure we're talking about the things that you actually want to know, that you came here. Is that okay? All right. So let's open it up, and I'll run. Heather can run the mic. All right. So Heather's going to run the mic. Who wants to break the ice and ask the first question, specifically around this idea of podcasting, or being a local expert, positioning yourself?
Hi, guys. I follow you. So here's my question. Can you hear me okay? Here's my question. In and out. How do you know who your audience is? You get that data? Is there any way you can?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So when you podcast, you're running that podcast typically through a podcast host. We use Podbean. And Libsyn. They use Libsyn. 2 of the more popular. Podbean, Libsyn, those are 2 of the more popular ones. You can get all that data typically through your podcast host. Demographic information, just like in Google Webmaster Tools, you can get information through your website.
Well, and I would also say pick topics that attracts the people you want to be a hero to. Like we specifically try to pick people who are thinking about leverage, like they're really probably already pretty successful, but they might be overworked, not have enough time, haven't built wealth. We'll try to stick to topics that we know will attract the kind of person that we want to attract to. And then you always want to have some kind of guide or something that they can download, because that captures their email and you can put them in your database. So then you can follow up when you have other things.
Yeah, we've added thousands of names, email addresses to our database just from the podcast of agents all across the country. I mean, everywhere, honestly. But yeah.
Ton of them not with KW.
Yeah, a lot of them not with KW, actually. We're probably 50-50, really, to be honest. KW, non-KW, as far as listeners. But we also have a lot of non-real estate people that listen, too, that are just business owners. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that, because they probably know a realtor, or, heck, one day they may want to do something or whatever. I think it's just a great opportunity. But one of the things that I like is we can track, like, what states listen the most. And so if we ever started to do an events or things like that, you can actually pull all the stats from your platform of where your listeners are coming from.
We just hit top 5 in Botswana, for instance. I think we're the only podcast in Botswana, apparently. But then we can say we're a top 5 podcast, right? Linda, I think what you said is really important. I mean, put together a profile. Who are you trying to attract to your market centers, right? Who is that person? Is it the R2 that's doing, 20 million? Is it a $50 million team owner? Who is that, right? Where's the soft spot in the market? Just like you're doing the guerrilla warfare from any perspective, do it for your podcast as well. What is your magic? What's your superpower? Is it leverage? Is it profit share? Is it wealth building? Is it investing? What is your superpower, and how can you attract the agent that's attracted to that? That's when we flip the script from recruiting to attracting, right? And you guys do this so well. The other thing that you guys just mentioned that I think everyone needs to pick up on, you need to have a hook in your show notes around downloads. And I'm talking to myself here because you guys do that 100 times better than we do it. Some type of download. It doesn't have to be anything super ridiculous, right? I mean, our hook for this, for instance, if anyone even noticed, was you guys will get a full breakdown of everything in mine and Joe's studio. All linked up, ready to go. You guys can go set up a studio in 2 days, all right? That's what you guys are going to get. That's what your listeners want as well. That's what agents at other brokerages want. Now you have them in your funnel.
How many of your market centers have podcast studios inside of them? Great job. Wow. Awesome. Yeah, that's great. If you don't, I'm talking to ours too. We should.
Yeah, what we found inside our market center is it's been an awesome opportunity for our agents to start finding their voice and getting on audio and video. All right, another question.
Yeah, so what is your formula for content? Because when I've done things like this in the past, like video blogs and stuff, the reason I don't do it is because I just run out of things to say. So do you have a formula that you follow?
So before the formula for content for us, it was a formula for consistently having guests. And so where we go to first, like when I think like where is 80% of our guests going to come from? For us, we draw from the top agents inside of KW. So I actually have a VA that one day a month, she is just calling through the top 500 agents in KW and getting them on our podcast, okay? What we do from there through the scheduling is we then look out to other companies and then even to other industries, thought leaders or whatever. We fill in and move our KW guests when we land the people from other companies. We accommodate their schedule, because what we found, we already have the relationship with our KW peeps and they are more willing to move around. Okay. So that's our content formula, because for us, we figured out we tell the story. We're not a topic-based podcast. We are a storytelling podcast about how entrepreneurs have pushed the chips all in, so to speak, on their life and business in real estate. Right. And so that even trickles into our first question. Take us back before real estate. What were you doing? Bring us up to this point. And then we'll organically go into whatever topic they bring us down. And we've not gotten negative feedback from our audience that we're repeating things, even though there's a lot of repetition. The truth is, 80% of real estate agents out there are dealing with the same 3 problems that we've all been hearing about for years: leads, listings, and leverage. And I'll add a 4th, leadership, right? And so a lot of our podcast episodes, fall into those categories. And that's really our content strategy.
And then we ask them to send in questions or challenges or opportunity. We've had a couple people come on in like a hot seat type situation where they bring their challenge on, and Dana and I ask on what we would do with it. And then the other thing is, if Dana and I are talking to agents, because we're always talking to agents, we listen for what their pain is, and we know if it's their pain, we talk about it because it's probably somebody else's pain too. You really won't, it'll be a fear you have, but you won't run out of stuff to say. I mean, we literally still go, what the heck are we going to talk about? But we always have something. It just, you will, if you got that podcast, you'll think of something.
Yeah. I would add to that, formula is a strong word for us. So I don't know that we would have one to give you to that, but I would say 2 things. When you're an individual person trying to do a podcast, it's a little bit more difficult. If you notice, we both and you two, like when it's 2 people and you can have a co-host, I think then if you don't have, you always just think of something, you know what I mean? You're just shooting the, you know what, and it turns into something great.
Well, and both of us are very learning based, so we're always going to have something. But another thing that's really good, if you can, we're both multipliers. If you can get a multiplier and a simplifier, it'd be a lot better. It works really well. But we're both multipliers.
Is she trying to get a new co-host?
No,
Is Dana up for grabs?
Neither one of us will do the research. We just both wing it. But if you had somebody that was like, a simplifier, they would probably do a little more planning. We don't do a lot of planning.
And then the guest. I mean, if you have trouble thinking of we just keep a shared note on our iPhones, and we just, anytime we think of an idea, we just put it in the shared note. But also a lot of times that's because when we have guests, it's because we can't, we want to hear from them, but also if we don't have something to talk about that week, then we're like, hey, let's just bring a guest on.
Yeah, and I would say another a pet peeve of mine, which I have found has been a pet peeve of many listeners of podcasts, is when this is just interviewing technique. When a host interrupts the guest, does that annoy anyone? Yeah, we know the great interviewers, right? And the great interviewers, they let the story, they let the guest tell and be the expert in the room. Okay. So don't put the pressure on yourself to be the expert and bring the content. That's why you have them there in the first place. I know is JT still in the house too?
Hey, question. A couple. Number 1, what's the best length of time in a podcast? And then number 2 is, how do you market the podcast? You said a little bit, but how do you market the podcast to get found?
Do you want me to start? All right. So the first question was time. It all depends. It's terrible. I mean, the most popular podcast in the world is Joe Rogan, right? Joe Rogan's episodes go up to 3 hours long. I think one of his more recent episodes maybe was even 4 hours long. Here's what I'll tell you about that length. None of us are talented enough to do that. And I believe you guys are awesome people. So what I'd say as a general rule of thumb is you want to be as short and concise as possible. The average attention span of the population gets shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. And so as you find your voice and as you find your tribe, you will earn the right to lengthen your podcast. So what I'd say as a general rule of thumb is I would start somewhere between 20 and 30 minutes if it's a story-based podcast, because the guest needs time to elaborate on their story. Okay? On a topical-based podcast, you may be able to condense it down to even shorter. Okay? It depends on your audience. It depends on your voice. Okay?
If there's value, they'll listen. So I think you can kind of gauge it and see some platforms will actually tell you like how long the average person is listening. It depends on what, like, you can upgrade and pay for some of those higher stats. We usually stick between 30 and 40 minutes.
20 is a little hard for us to do, but we thought we were going to try for 20, but about an average, about 30, 35 minutes is what we do. I know for my own self, I love to listen to podcasts, but man, when they're an hour and something long, I can't even stay in my sauna that long. So that's just too long, right? Yeah. So I may listen to that 2 sessions. So I just find I don't want it to be that long. So I don't think anybody else does either. And as far as getting your audience, for me, I had a pretty good sized database because I've been teaching all across the country and stuff like that. And then Dana uses social media.
Yes, I would say both of those are very strong, and you probably do the same. But social media is where it's at. I mean, oh, and back to the time really fast. Think about when people are listening to podcasts, they're usually driving or they're getting ready in the morning, putting their makeup on. Sorry, guys. Or they're on the treadmill or they're working out. And so those time frames are usually around that 30-ish minute. So I always try to think about when they're listening and how long does that usually take. For us, email drip is huge. I mean, we drip on thousands now at this point between your database and my database. We send an email every single week with the downloadable guide. I know most of you probably get it. I told Heather, I said, I've ran into more people here this week that have said, I get all your emails. I'm like, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But emails definitely. And then social media is huge. Facebook and Instagram are the biggest for us.
Yeah. Definitely for us too, our average episode length is 40 minutes. And we set the expectation with the guests. Again, we bring them right through. Okay, so we prep our guests and set the expectations. Hey, most guests spend this much on this first question. Take us back, right? And then we go 30 minutes. And then we're going to launch into the last segment for about 5 minutes. If we believe that the guest is bringing value, we will reserve the right to lengthen it. But we stick to that parameter. And like you said, like they said, if you're bringing valuable content, people are. So just inspect on the back end. When are my listeners falling off? All right. Does it make sense that at 25 minutes they're falling off? Go into some of those metrics that she just talked about. Okay. Are my listeners listening in the morning? So are they listening while they're getting their coffee in the morning? You can make logical inferences with all of that, and then you can actually get into more advanced techniques of segmenting your database. But I would say, as a basis, you need to have a weekly email that goes out the same day the episode drops with links to all of the major platforms. Make it easy for someone to stumble onto your content.
We utilize teasers, like the little teaser promo clip videos a lot, and we get a lot of interaction with the teasers. If we post them, we actually use them more for like an after post episode video where we'll say, if you missed it, here's the like we kind of do both back and forth, but those are easy and they're simple, and a lot of people get a lot of traction from those.
Yeah, and from a social media standpoint for us, we're definitely highly driven through Instagram. Instagram is where a lot of people find us. Is that good? All right.
So 2 questions. One, also new to the area. I relocated as a team leader, and same thing, just working on rebuilding validity. So do you try to keep it broker agnostic or secret? I mean, that was one of my challenges, like, did it face or not? Because obviously it's a lot of content, right, that we get from the training that we attend. And then secondly, one of my top favorite podcasts is John Maxwell, and there's always a resource or a download. And then I use that for training. Are you guys leveraging that at all, and how?
We do not talk about KW or Keller Williams. We try our best to completely keep that out of it because it's not about that at all. And if you don't, you'll lose a lot of people. So we completely leave that out. I mean,
sometimes if we have a KW guest, or like when we talk about Gary Keller, I mean, or something like that, but we don't ever really, we don't talk about recruiting.
Usually the guests make the mistake more than anybody. They'll start talking about how much they love KW, and we're like, oh crap.
Yeah. And then what was the other one? Sorry. Oh, yes. Yeah, so we actually copied John's and Craig Rochelle's to make our downloadable guide because I use both of those 24/7. And people download them and they love them. And we just recently added, I don't know where Heather is, but what did we just add on ours? There's a link on
email where it just automatically pulls up that episode guide.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So they can just click right, download the PDF, and then print it or do whatever they want. But we just started doing those probably a year ago. We did not do them we think, was that about a year ago, Sarah? Yeah. And it made a huge difference. Yeah, people tell us that they love them.
All right, repeat the first question. Broker agnostic. Yes, definitely broker agnostic. We wanted our brand to not say anything about Keller Williams. And when we have Keller Williams guests on, we specifically tell them, this is not a Keller Williams podcast. Tell us your story like you tell us your story, your client story. Okay. So yeah, they'll bring up that they're with Keller Williams, but we are not trying to put Keller Williams in their face. Now, I do have a call to action at the end of every single episode that if someone's interested in a career in real estate or growing their business to the next level, to reach out to me for consultation. Okay. But again, it's not about KW. So that call to action hasn't produced a ton. I can track some appointments to that, and a couple of recruits actually. So when they have, it's actually converted highly. And then from a guide standpoint, we do link everything up in the show notes, but we don't have a downloadable PDF guide. So it's definitely an area of improvement.
Be sure to subscribe for more business strategies and tactics to inspire you to live an abundant real estate life. Don't forget to rate and review so we can bring you the best content. Find this and other valuable information at everythinglifeandrealestate.com.